Welcome to the Fed to Fed podcast, where we dive into the dynamic world of government technology. In this podcast series, we'll be joined by current and former federal leaders and industry trailblazers who are at the forefront of innovation. Here, we speak openly and honestly about the challenges and opportunities facing the federal government and the Department of Defense and its partners in the modern age, driving innovation and the incredible capabilities of technology along the way. Whether you're a federal leader, a tech industry professional, or simply fascinated by IT modernization, just like us, this podcast is for you. And we're so happy to have you tuning in. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to talk.
Fantastic. Well, we've had a great opportunity to talk a little bit ahead of time about some of these incredible things that you're driving and leading, and so is Merlin Cyber. And I can't wait to dive into these questions. So I'll go ahead and get started and kick off the first question and ask you, Jeremy, with the new administration taking office, what cybersecurity and operational ramifications should agencies and organizations be most concerned about? And are there any specific policy shifts or geopolitical factors that heighten cyber risks?
To be honest, there's two things. We're going to keep off of whatever the news du jour is, but there are really two things that around the efficiency efforts that draw my concern from a cybersecurity perspective. The first of those is understanding that in any organization, termination, onboarding, offboarding of a user happens on a daily basis. And typically it's something that is planned out. There's days ahead of time. Different stockholders are involved with it. Folks who own the various accounts, et cetera, are aware of it and are making plans. With these terminations happening so rapidly and in such a large number, I'm concerned around the account lifecycle management of user accounts, right? I'm not worried about the Active Directory accounts. From what it says in the news reports, what I've heard anecdotally, those are taken care of, right? Those are generally, it's pretty easy to go into Active Directory, turn it off. But it's the third-party accounts. It's the service accounts. It's the application accounts. It's the app that Bob is using in accounting that only Bob and Charlie use, but it holds a bunch of critical data. It's maybe the VPN account or the lockbox issues, or jump box that's used. And those are the accounts I really worry about. It. I think real world examples of that would be like the Colonial Pipeline hack. Right? Colonial Pipeline was a single VPN account that was floating out there by a user that the adversary knew was gone, and they simply started looking for the accounts. I find it difficult to believe that the thousands of workers who've been let go aren't in a similar position where there's not those third-party accounts floating out there. So lifecycle management is one of those big, huge issues that I'm really concerned about. And that kind of flows into the secondary one, which is really insider threat, where you have a large number of federal workers now who've been let go, who we know are being targeted by both Chinese and Russian assets, who they have, if not classified, at least sensitive data. They know what their username is. They know what their passwords were. They know what applications they were used. They know bits and pieces about how business is done inside the government. And that is all information that is valuable to our adversaries. So really for me, kind of in summary, I look at it as account lifecycle management, of understanding how to break those down, how to better secure them. And there's a lot of different products out there that you can build off. There's assessments that you can do that would help with that. And then insider threat is really understanding and watching for accounts of individuals who have been terminated of being leveraged once again internally. So, an NDR solution, for instance, monitoring that, hey, Joe user has tried to log in again. Well, Joe user was let go 3 weeks ago. Why is that account suddenly active here? So things like that, I think, those are probably my two biggest ones that I'm concerned with right now.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that. So what are the most pressing cybersecurity threats today? And what recent updates from CISA should organizations be paying attention to? And what proactive measures are being recommended to mitigate those risks?
So one of the more interesting ones is the Medusa ransomware. And Medusa is kind of interesting simply because of the complexity of the hack itself, the way it's being leveraged. And it's interesting to me as well because it's also something that's growing significantly over time, right? So the initial instigation of that was simply a CVE, several CVEs that were being leveraged from the exterior and then going in. We're now seeing that that is expanded now to actually leveraging corrupted DLLs within, shutting down DLLs that are bypassing the endpoint, the EDR tools, so the endpoint protection, right, the antivirus, if you will, on those local machines. And so that's grown considerably. And really, this kind of goes back to the earlier concern, the CVEs themselves, right? The vulnerability, that's technical debt. Technical debt takes time, takes attention, and it takes meticulous planning to update and secure them. When you have chaos internally, it becomes very difficult to keep up with that. And so, while ideally organizations would have already in the past dealt with CVs that are out there. In truth, a lot of times because of the way, especially in the federal space, the way our government has been built of blocking on top of blocks, on top of blocks, on top of blocks, you often have older technology deployed that you can't update easily. So once that breach occurs on the outside, that's open game, right? And that's you can look at that from an OT perspective, an IoT perspective. Both of those are highly susceptible to external attacks. But Medusa itself provides that initial one. Medusa is not going after OT environments, but they are leveraging accounts that can be found. More importantly, they're also performing, complete ransomware, so complete encryption of the systems inside. So how do you mitigate that? You need really a PAM solution or an EPM solution. What I mean by that is privileged access management or an endpoint privilege management solution that doesn't allow an account to be escalated, doesn't allow it closely secures an account within not only the system, but also the other services. This kind of links back to that earlier one around account lifecycle management, right? Zero trust is all about the user. Now, that's fantastic, but by locking our security 100% around the user concept, that means the user would have to actually be managed, right? The chaos we talked about earlier kind of flows forward into, all right, I have orphaned accounts that are now being taken advantage. It could be taken advantage of by ransomware that comes in through a CV that's left open because of the chaos of moving parts. So it's stability has been lost to an extent. We need to get a hold of that. We need to get our environments back together. And we need to be aware that cyber hygiene is every bit as important as the user account lifecycle management and keeping user account controls that are in place.
That's great, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned technical debt previously when we were talking and cyber hygiene, and they often get overlooked. Can you share a real world example of how organizations should be addressing these issues right now to reduce vulnerabilities?
So I was recently lucky enough to be at a conference in Helsinki with NATO Tide, and the one of the presenters there talked about actually several of the presenters there talked about the continual attacks they're under via Russian or Chinese assets as it came through, and almost universally, if it wasn't via an email, right? If it wasn't the number, the 70% of all attacks come via email. If it wasn't one of those, it was leveraging a known vulnerability on the external firewalls to get in, or on the VPNs to get into the environment. That's technical debt. Now, and that becomes a question of, well, how do we fix that? How do we approach that? It is not simply a matter of, hey, great, I did a scan, and current scan technologies typically, I do a scan, you get a huge Excel spreadsheet of what it is. But understanding which of those do I fix first? And also, not only that, but it kind of belies the platform play of if I can't get a hold of technical debt, if I'm an organization that's very large, or that I have legacy or what have you, there's reasons why I haven't updated. How do I still protect myself? And so you have two ways. You have automatic remediation where you just kind of bite the bullet, perform the updates, and deal with the fallout, which is honestly the way probably 80% of all organizations have to do it. Um, Ignore it, which is unfortunately a large other percentage. 80% is really not a real number. But I don't have real data of what that 80% is. Anyways, but either I fix it and take the fallout, I don't fix it and just roll the dice that I don't get hacked from it, Or I do defensive depth where my primary firewall is one vendor, my secondary firewall is a different one. So I have two different sets of CVEs between the two that are taking advantage. One of my presenters from Nader Tide was unfortunately had to take the last one because the vendor wasn't fixing the vulnerability on the external, right? So you can extrapolate that out further of, let's say, for instance, I'm going to name call on this one, Microsoft. Microsoft it has a severe vulnerability around shortcut files where I can take a shortcut file, I can modify it, I can send it to you, it'll run whatever command I want, and it can run it as a system account regardless of the account escalation. And I now own your machine. Congratulations, you are now mine. All your bases belong to us. That's not a good thing, right? But that's a vulnerability that can't be patched. So that means I have to build protections around it. That's somewhere where an endpoint protection would prevent that privilege escalation. That's somewhere where actual monitoring escalation attempts around it or lateral movement around it would feed into it. All right, those are real world problems today, and a couple different ways to approach it.
That's great. Thank you so much for those great examples. So, Jeremy, as AI adoption accelerates, how should organizations establish cybersecurity guardrails? And what steps should they take to ensure their data is cyber ready for AI and emerging technologies like quantum computing?
So really, there's three things. So I know I've keep harping on user account management and user lifecycle, but that really is part of it. If you look at some of the different hacks where the jailbreaking of AIs, it was oftentimes tricking the AI into doing things outside of what it should be doing. It's in a lot of ways, if you want to simplify, it's kind of similar to log4j hacks, where I'm simply leveraging a DLL and using that DLL to do using that process to do things it's not intended to. That's like telling an AI or sending it as part of the AI to the AI a question of, hey, I'm going to give you a SQL statement, and oh wait, and it's SQL star user. Well, now I get all your user data. It's just been regurgitated to me, right? So that's first. So the first thing there is locking down what the AI is allowed to do from a user access perspective, what the AI is self-treated, just like a user. It has limited permissions, limited access, what it can do, where it can do it, and how it can do it. That's first off. Second one really is your design is shifting left in your creation and your development process. And shifting left is not, that goes back to the technical debt conversation, right? So it's amazing how all this flows through, right? It goes back to the technical debt conversation of if you start with secure programming to begin with. So whatever APIs you're leveraging within out of GitHub or wherever your resource is, securing those or using secured ones up front removes technical debt you're going to have to deal with later on, right? For instance, if you look at like once, leveraging that log4j concept, log4j was vulnerable because it included multiple DLLs underneath it that were not necessary for it to function. And then you were able then to take advantage of those. If I've removed those and locked those down early, that technical debt is removed. CVE never occurs for me. It doesn't matter, right? The third range really is around how do you protect your data, right? What are you looking at data? And there's a couple of really interesting articles over the last couple of weeks, this being late March here, that around post quantum computing, around quantum advantage. I believe one of the headlines was the coming quantum apocalypse. I guess that was probably pretty clickable overall because I paid for the subscription, so there you go. But really, it's when you listen to IBM, is one of the foremost foremost quantum researchers out there building the devices, right? They say quantum advantage occurs in 2029. So that's a mere 4 years from now. Right? It sounds like a lot of time, but in the lifespan of data, it's not. So that means you should be today looking at quantum resistant encryption already and making a decision of tactical versus strategic. What I mean by that, what do I care is decrypted now? For instance, say signal communications that have been captured, right? From the chat tool Signal, I can capture those packets. And what do I decrypt today versus what do I save and decrypt in 4 years from now? Or to be honest, nation states are really the ones with quantum computing resources today. So when they apply that math to those packets, so that's really where that is, right? It's kind of the quantum readiness and post-quantum encryption, being ready and making those choices now of what data is important, what data is impactful today, tactical, and what data is important in 4 years, maximal, strategic.
Jeremy, thank you so much. The nuggets and the information that you shared today is going to be so useful, not only for the federal government across the board, Department of Defense, but also industry partners that would be that are in the moment every single day, like you are, making sure that things are safe. So thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
This concludes today's episode of the Fed to Fed podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us continue bringing you thought-provoking conversations with the brightest minds in government technology. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we will continue to explore opportunities to harness the power of technology and explore what's next in developing a more innovative and efficient government. Until then, this is the Fed to Fed podcast by GovTech Connects. Thank you for joining us.